So first of all, you know that whenever I give anything, talks or any ceremonies, I always love telling little stories about it. Okay, that's better. And when you put this little recorder around my neck, it was like giving somebody a medal. And it reminded me of a story in the 2000 Olympic Games, which was held in Australia, in Sydney. Can you all understand the English? Very good. It's a silly question to ask, because if you did understand the question, it means you do understand English. But anyhow, at the 2000 Olympic Games in Sydney, the government arranged to have priests, chaplains, pastors, monks even, of all traditions in the athletes' village, available if anybody needed some help. And one of the monks who lived in Sydney was on duty in the Olympic village. And he said that one day these two parents came to see him, and they were from Eastern Europe. And they said, our daughter has got into the finals of the 800-meter sprint. It's one of the big events. And she never expected to do so well. She's now so nervous, she can't sleep at night, she can't train properly, and she's got the final of the 800 meters sprint the next couple of days. And all her country people will be watching, all her friends and family will be watching, and she's so scared, so anxious, that she doesn't know what's going to happen. And the parents said, we're not Buddhists, but we do know that through meditation that you can let go of all your fear and anxiety. Can you please help? And the monk said, of course. Bring your daughter to see me, which is what they did. And this young girl, extremely fit and healthy physically, but she was so worried, so sick in her mind. You could see that. And the monk taught her meditation. And once he taught her the basics of meditation, he never saw her again for a few days. The monk never watched the TV, never knew what was happening in that final. It was only about 3 or 4 days later, after the final was completed, he saw in the distance these 3 people walking towards him. The mother, the father, and the athlete in between. And as they were walking towards him, they were smiling. And as they came closer, he noticed that on the athlete there was a little string with something in the middle around her neck. That wasn't a microphone. There was something else. And as it came closer, he noticed the color. The color was yellow. Gold. They come to say thank you to the monk for teaching their daughter how to meditate. Enough so she could win the gold medal, 2000 Olympic Games in Sydney, doing much better than she ever expected. And I remember reading that story in the Sydney Morning Herald, one of the great stories, what happens in Olympic Games. So be careful. if you complete this meditation retreat and you do well, is there any people who want to go to Olympic Games? When's the next Olympic Games? Where is it? In the USA. Is it? I can't hear you. Maybe say in Hokkien. Anyway, whatever it is, it's amazing some of the stories which people have told me over those years and how successful this meditation can actually be and how it can make sort of people who probably would never win something like an Olympic medal to get the gold medal. Anyway, that was just what I just remembered when you gave me this little medal. That's the wrong colour. But anyway, now I can give you the 3 refuges and the 8 precepts. You know what the 8 precepts are? What are they? The 8 precepts are the usual 5 precepts, plus the 3rd one is enhanced, so there's no sexuality at all. And quite frankly, I don't mind being honest with you. I've been telling this to a few people recently, because I'm now kind of age. They're asking me, why did you become a monk? All that time ago. And one of the stories I tell them, well, I was heterosexual. I had girlfriends, only one at a time. But the last girlfriend which I had was a long time girlfriend, about 6 months. I was really keen on her. Eventually it all fell apart. You know why? I never realized this at the time. I should have really apologized to her. I went on one of my first meditation retreats. I was still a student at the time. I remember saying goodbye to her in the town of Gloucester. Not that I'm breaking up, I'm just going to go on a retreat for a few days. I'll see you afterwards. When I went on a retreat, I had some very, very good meditation. And honestly, once I had that very good meditation, I wasn't interested in girlfriends anymore. Honestly, it's weird, but I'm saying it as clearly as I can, that the meditation gives you another experience of happiness, which is much more powerful, more attractive, more pure, less troublesome than anything else you've ever experienced. So be careful. If you're engaged and want to be married next week, you better finish this retreat now. I'm actually being honest. I never realized how powerful this meditation is. So the 3rd of those precepts is having no sexuality at all, So don't even touch members of the opposite gender. And that's also the reasons why one of those precepts, the 7th precept, we don't wear anything which attracts other people. No jewelry, no sort of makeup, no sensory dresses. We just wear simple things, just like ordinary people. Anyway, that 3rd precept is no sexuality at all. 4th precept, obviously not lying. 5th, not taking alcohol or drugs. And that's one of the other things which I really love about these precepts. When you start taking alcohol or non-medicinal drugs, that bends your mind, it twists it around, and you don't really see what's truthful. You think you may be happy for a while. That happiness is not deep, it's not long-lasting, and it doesn't give the opportunity to get deep understanding and insight into what's really going on. So we make that vow not to take any alcohol or non-medicinal drugs for the period of the retreat. And the 6th precept is not using high seats. And sometimes I say, this is not a high seat. Yesterday when I arrived in Penang, I was sitting at 30,000 feet. The only reason not to have high or luxurious seats is actually to lessen the sense of ego and self. Let's try and do it simply. The reason which I sit up here is, even though it's actually not so bad, but sometimes it's very uncomfortable sitting on these high seats. When you want to meditate, so sitting on the floor is far more comfortable. But nevertheless, I can just about get my legs crossed in here. So I think it should be okay. But the only reason you can sit up here is so everyone can see you easily. And they can hear you when you're giving the talk. And the next precept is not using, again, actually not singing or dancing, not sort of kind of entertaining yourself. Just be nice and peaceful. That's one of the reasons I hope that during this retreat you're not allowed to look at your mobile phone or to look at sort of the internet and see, I don't know what you can see on the internet over here in Penang. It's nice to put aside all of that entertainment from the outside and get into the entertainment inside with your mind. Just a quick word on this before I actually get into the 8 precepts. The Buddha actually made a big distinction between the happiness, the pleasure of the 5 senses, and the pleasure of the mind, of the 6th sense. He said the pleasures of the 5 senses. This is from one of the suttas the Buddha gave, Pasadika Sutta. He said, if anybody asks you, monks, do you have any enjoyment, any pleasure? You should ask them, what type of pleasure? And if they say the 5 sense pleasures of seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, or physical touch, say no. Any pleasures at all? Of the 6th sense? Yes, of the mind. That is allowed, permitted, encouraged. I hope that 1 or 2 of these talks which I give, you will get inspired. The inner pleasure. And I remember that because I remember many talks of someone like an Ajahn, and sometimes they were so beautiful that you started crying out of joy, out of what they call pity. It's gorgeous. And sometimes that happens whenever you see a monk or a nun and they give a beautiful talk. You feel so uplifted that you feel so happy, you tend to tear up. That is allowed and also encouraged. And of course, when you get into these meditations, I would hope that some of you, I know as many of you I've recognized, I've seen you many times before, many of you I hope will get some bliss states, where you get really happy inside. That is allowed, permitted. And in that sutta, somebody also asked, well, what happens if you get into happiness and bliss through the 6th sense in your meditation? And the Buddha replied, there is only 4 possible consequences if you indulge in the bliss of meditation. Only 4. And those 4 consequences of enjoying the bliss of meditation are stream winning, 2, once returning, 3, non-returning, 4, full enlightenment. Those and no more. The Pasadika Sutta, the Digha Nikaya. So please remember, these are only one of those 4 things will happen to you if you start blissing out in the deep meditations. Are you prepared for that? That's what we're supposed to be doing. So anyway, so that's with the bliss states. So with the seventh precept, we don't need any other entertainments. And also we don't need to sort of sing and dance, we don't need to wear cosmetics, just simple things, that's enough. And the last precept, even things like at the airport. I noticed there was a long queue at Perth Airport this time, and I was being questioned by the person. In your bag, sir, have you got any liquids? I said, no. So, I mean, no liquids, it could be even like gels. Have you got any hair gel, sir? And when I stroked my hair, he was so embarrassed, and all the people around me were laughing their heads off. Did I go through? So anyway, I don't have any hair gel. Please don't try and offer me some. So anyway, the last of those precepts, again, is not using the high and luxurious seats. Be a simple monk. Be a simple nun. Be a simple human being. I can't help telling these stories because I probably forget about them afterwards. That's one of the reasons why coming in here, I was talking to Chaupo to say, it's nice of you to have a welcome committee to receive me. Thank you very much. You know, I much prefer just to sneak in the back way and just go and sit down. I've done that several times, and I really enjoy that. Once over in Vietnam, I was going to a conference there. One of the reasons I enjoy going to conference is, for once, I can just sit down on a chair in the back and just listen to what other people say. Usually, when you're a senior monk teaching a retreat, I have to sit in the big seat, and people listen to me, and I never get the chance to listen to you. On this occasion, I sat in the back somewhere, and this young Vietnamese monk came and sat next to me. And then as he was sitting next to me, he started talking to me. I realized he was there. He noticed I was a Western monk. He wanted to practice his English. And so the first question he asked to practice his English, where are you from? And I said, I am Australian monk. Oh, very good. Thank you. And then he carried on very shortly afterwards. Do you know a famous monk in Australia called Ajahn Brahm? And I said, yes, I know him very well. I'm being honest. Oh, what's he like? And I couldn't resist. And I said, I am Ajahn Brahm. And he threw his hands up. Sorry. And that was a great compliment. Because one of my favorite stories, again, from the Buddhist scriptures, is when there was one of the Buddha's disciples went to the very west of India, and he taught the Dhamma, and there were many, many monks and nuns. He converted to being good practicing Buddhists. And one of them, having got his basic training in meditation and Dhamma, decided to try and visit the Buddha while he was still alive. This monk had never seen the Buddha before. He'd only seen the Buddha's disciple. And so he went on foot many, many days to where the Buddha was living at the time, the Ganges Valley. And as he was walking, The only places he can stay, if there was a temple or monastery, great, but a lot of times he would just stay wherever he could, under a tree or wherever. And this time, there was a workman's house with a big shed in the back, and he asked, from the workman, can I have permission to stay in your workshop just overnight? Because I'm traveling to find the Buddha. And he said, yes, of course. So he went into the workshop, and it's very easy to sleep in a workshop. And he put his stuff down, and a short time later the workman came again and said, there's another monk arrived who also wants to stay here tonight. Is that all right by you? He said, oh yes, of course. So that night, that workshop had 2 monks who were going to stay there the night. And the first monk from the west started meditating, and the monk who came afterwards also sat down to meditate. And they were such good meditators, they meditated all night, just sitting up nice and peaceful. And then the monk who came second just asked the first monk, you sit meditation very well. Oh, thank you. So do you. And then the second monk said, no, who's your teacher? And he said, I was very fortunate to have as my teacher this disciple of the Buddha who taught me everything about meditation. Now, this time of my monk life, I'm traveling to this part of India to see if I can find the Buddha, to worship him. Very, very good. And then the first monk said, you sit meditation so well as well. Who's your teacher? That's when that second monk who arrived said, I don't have a teacher. I am the Buddha. And I love that story. The humility of an enlightened one. They never put themselves up on the best seat. They never say, I am the Buddha. Except when people ask. And also, the Buddha was unrecognizable, which I also like. This is my robe, doctor. What best if I do it? Are you okay? Okay. It happens very often, so do you want to sit up here? No, thank you. So anyway, that's what happens when you become someone who vanishes. Many times the Buddha would have gone to many places and not been recognized. Be able to see, hear, investigate, and also teach. But anyway, I'm now going to do the 3 refuges and the 8 precepts. Are you all ready? So the monks can also join in with the 3 refuges, but please don't join in with the 8 precepts. I expect much more from you. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhaṃ saraṇaṃ gacchāmi, Dhammaṃ saraṇaṃ gacchāmi, Saṅghāṃ saraṇaṃ gacchāmi, Dutiyampi Buddhaṃ saraṇaṃ gacchāmi, Dutiyampi Dhammaṃ saraṇaṃ gacchāmi, Dutiyampi Saṅghāṃ saraṇaṃ gacchāmi, Tatiyampi Buddhaṃ saraṇaṃ gacchami. Tatiyampi dhammang sarana gacchami. Tatiyampi sanghang saranang gacchami. I will now say each precept. Once I've said it, then you repeat it once I'm finished. Panatipata Veramani Sikkhapadang Samadhiyami. Adinadana Veramani Sikkhapadang Samadhiyami. Brahmacharya Veramani Sikkhapadang Samadhiyami. Musawada Veramani Sikkhapadang Samadhiyami. Sura Meraya Majjapamadhatana Veramani Sikkhapadang Samadhiyami. Vikala Bhojana Veramani Sikkhapadang Samadhiyami. Nacha Gita Vadita Visukha Dasana Mala Ganda Vilepana Dharana Mandana Vibhusanatana Veramani Sikkhapadang Samadhiyami. Ucha Sayana Mahasayana Veramani Sikkhapadang Samadhiyami. And I usually give this blessing at the end, but I'm changing it slightly on the advice of one of the monks. Imani atasikhapadani silena sukating yanti silena samadhi sampada silena niputing yanti tasma silang visodaye. And you go sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. You notice the change? Usually we say silena bhoga sampada. But by having good precepts, that fulfills good wealth and prosperity. But instead they say, why don't you call it samadhi sampada? Fulfills the stillness of deep meditation. I thought it was a nice suggestion. So that's what I did this time. It's an understanding that it doesn't just give rise to happiness, it gives rise to the opportunity to find stillness. And so often when people have problems in their meditation, they always ask for, can you please tell me, is it because I'm sitting in the wrong way, or I'm doing the wrong type of meditation practice? And a lot of times there's a natural connection between your precepts, being good and virtuous, and your practice of meditation. So often I tell people, how are your precepts going? Are you finding any difficulty keeping those precepts? And if you are, maybe put some attention to make sure your precepts are more pure. And then you'll find your meditation is much easier. Because once you have good precepts, you find you do have more joy and happiness in this life. I'm actually starting the talk now. Is that okay? Actually, when I first came in here, I started talking. So this is the Dhamma talk. Is that okay? Okay. Really, about meditation, how do you actually get that happiness? Where does it really come from? And a lot of times it's, well, the Buddha said, a lack of regret. You look back on what you've done today, you've got no remorse. You have no to thinking, oh, this is a terrible thing which I did. And even later on, I still remember when I first came over to Malaysia, and I used to give talks over in Kuala Lumpur, and even teaching a retreat where there was an upatak. It was one of the two twins. I think it was one of the twins was Mangala. You know those two twins, those of you in KL? Anyway, this is many years ago, 20, 30 years ago or something. And when I told him about the importance of things like precepts, the sila, the virtue, and I said especially when you get to the stage in meditation, which I will talk in more depth later on, called the nimittas, the lights which appear in the mind, which are always really, really beautiful. And I said sometimes when a person first experiences those lights in the mind, sometimes it's like seeing a cloth, a white cloth, all stained and dirty, like it should have been in the washing machine, but it's all stained and not clean. And he said that's because your virtue has not been that pure in your lives the last few days. And he came up to me. He wanted a private interview quickly. He said, yes, I did get these nimittas, these lights in the mind, but they were filthy. I said, well, what have you been doing in your life? Exactly, Ajahn Brahm, what should I do? This is one of the things, you see, the result of when you keep precepts and when you don't keep precepts. And one of the reasons also I'm telling this story, what happens to you on this retreat if you break any of those precepts? Do I have to expel you from this meditation retreat? No. I don't know why people feel that in Buddhism that we have punishments. It's one of the things which inspired me about the Buddha's teachings, especially you look at the monks' Vinaya. In those teachings, he says there's no punishments. What you should always remember is if you break any precept, to confess it as soon as possible. Tell somebody you respect what you've done. And after you tell them what you've done, then you find ways of making amends. No punishment. We learn from any precept which we break. And to make a very powerful point about that, many of you know all these stories which I've told over the years. If you've heard this one before, please look upon it like when I was young. They're called golden oldies. Nice stories which are there to remind you of an important teaching of Dhamma. So when I was starting a monastery over in Australia, one of the people who came to stay with me, he wanted to begin his training as an 8-precept anagarika, and then afterwards he'd become a samanera, and then become a bhikkhu. And he came up to see me early one morning, and he was very troubled. He said he hadn't slept all night. And as he hadn't slept all night, I said, being very kind, and getting me something to drink. What's inside of it? Water. Excellent. Here's to your health. And he said to me, he hadn't slept all night. He needed to speak to me urgently. And he said, the night before, in the middle of the night, he felt hungry. He was a Westerner. Is it over here, poulet or angmo? How do you say it? No, poulet is Bahasa. Hokkien, is it angmo? Angmo. I should know that. I'm an angmo. And he was an angmo. And anyway, he said that he felt so hungry, he snuck into the kitchen in the middle of the night, and he made himself a sandwich. And even worse, he ate that sandwich. He broke his precepts, Vikala Bhojana. And because he broke his precept, he thought, I feel so guilty. I'm sure I'm going to be kicked out of the monastery. I said, no, I'm not going to kick you out. As long as you confess what you've done. I told him all the other things which you can do. Number 1, eat more at lunchtime. Number 2, there's all these other things in our Theravada tradition you're allowed to eat in the evening without breaking your precepts. Know that Chao Po knows all of those things because you got your fridge stuffed with them. So I try and offer to me cheese, dark chocolate, things like honey, and many other things, but I'm not going to tell you because otherwise you'll go searching for me on this retreat. And then I said, so try and eat some more. If you make a mistake and really, really, really do need to eat something in the evening, then maybe try some of those. They're allowable. But then he told me, that's not good enough. He said, I know my character. If you just let me off, then I'll do the same thing again. He told me because he'd broken a precept, he needed to be punished. And it just so happened, just like fortune, that night before, I'd been reading a book on Australian history. Years and years ago, when they sent people to Australia, they sent prisoners to Australia. And if they did anything wrong, they were flogged with this very vicious, brutal whip. It was called the Cat of Nine Tails. Have you heard about that before? But anyhow, he had. I said, well, if you want an Australian punishment, let me give you 50 strokes of the cat. And his face went more white than the clothes he was wearing. He really thought that Ajahn Brahm was going to beat him. And then I explained, in Buddhism, especially in any monastery where I teach, 50 strokes of the cat means find one of the cats who lives in the monastery. We had 2 at that time. Find one of them, put it on your lap, and stroke it 50 times. 1, 2. That's called the punishment of 50 strokes of the cat. You're not going to beat or cause you pain. The only reason you feel you need to be punished, you don't have enough wisdom and compassion. Compassion for others, compassion for yourself. You've made a mistake. I'm not saying that's not a mistake. Learn how to be kinder to yourself so you don't need to make that mistake ever again. So if any of you breaks any precept, you'll find it doesn't make the meditation harder. But also, if you feel guilty about anything, it means your loving kindness, your sense of forgiveness is never strong enough. So develop some metta meditation, some loving kindness. They can forgive everything. You're learning. If you never made a mistake during this retreat, it means you were perfectly enlightened already. You didn't really need to come on this retreat in the first place. But because you do make mistakes, we're here to be able to learn. And the kindness really, really helps. That's one of the reasons why we do have these precepts for retreats. We have these precepts because they're fundamental to being able to get into deep meditation. Otherwise, your mind is either too tight, trying to protect you from seeing some of the things you feel a bit guilty about. It's not open, not relaxed enough. You're not trusting your inner world enough. And because of that, you'll never get into the deep meditations. So please, be kind to yourself and keep your precepts. Then, basic about meditation, what do? You know the answer? Very easy. Nothing. Do nothing. How many of you understand the power of that teaching? If you did, you wouldn't need any more teachings. It's one of the most difficult things in the world for people to do. Nothing. When I was in South Korea, not so long ago, because I teach over there as well, one of the monks over there, he came to spend, I think, the rains retreat with me over in Bodhinyana Monastery. And he said it was the first time he ever experienced a nice meditation, a deep meditation. He was so surprised, but just so amazed, that he went back to make sure that these teachings were spread far and wide. You know, little things. Once I remember he arranged a ceremony over in the DMZ, the demilitarized zone. I love telling people I attended that ceremony. We're supposed to be doing walking meditation in the DMZ. Ajahn Ganha, which many of you know, was there. His doctor refused to let him go into the DMZ. As a senior Korean monk from the Jogje order, he was also there. He wouldn't go in. So you know who went in to lead this procession in a DMZ? Ajahn Brahm. So I led about 3,000, I couldn't have been that many, I think it was, yeah, South Korean meditators, walking meditation inside the DMZ. I was shot many times with cameras and with video cameras. we call that, kind of a shot, a video shot, a camera shot, not with any bullets. But anyhow, after the going through that, to create a sense of peace inside a demilitarized zone. Afterwards, he came and gave a small talk. At the end of the talk, I was asked, can you please tell us something deep but simple so we can remember you by it? What I said was one of the deepest teachings, that if you want to get success in meditation, learn how to relax to the max. And I got about 3,000 or 4,000 people chanted with me, relax. And they all went, relax to the max, to the max. Sometimes because I say it, people think it's a joke. It's kind of funny, but it's so true. If you want deep meditation, please relax your body and relax your mind. So everything becomes really peaceful and very still. When I say it that way, how you relax your body, you need to be mindful of it first. And not just mindful, kindful too. I can look at my body now and think, yeah, I'm aware of my legs, but they're not in a position where I can be at peace for too long. If I'm going to start meditation, I will move my legs so they're as comfortable as I can possibly make them. I relax my back. It's not leaning against anything. I have found through many, many years of pain, the best posture for me is actually sit up, nice and straight. It actually feels better, especially when you do long periods of meditation. Relaxing my shoulders, especially relaxing my head. You know that sometimes people's head is too far forward. It makes it even easier to fall asleep. If you had put your head up and feel its position and move it backwards slightly, you find it's easier to keep aware for much longer periods. But I also pay attention to how I feel on my face. It's great to be able to close the eyes when you're meditating, but you don't shut them tight. You're not screwing up your eyes as if you're really scared of something. Just letting the eyelids close naturally. And the mouth to be closed, but only sort of slightly. And you can feel the muscles around the eyes and the mouth and the nose. If there's any tightness there, that is usually because of fear, anxiety, some negative emotion anywhere. Those negative emotions in the mind, you can see them in a person's face. That's how it's easy to tell. You can all tell when a person is scared or angry. And the other thing of my face, which I always try to do when I start meditating, is actually look at the corners of my mouth and turn those corners of the mouth slightly upwards. A little smile. Sometimes when I'm meditating, I find I'm pretty peaceful, but there's something kind of missing there. The happiness, the joy is not really full. And I teach this as well on retreats. If you are meditating, things are getting peaceful, but you haven't got that joy, that happiness, which is an important part of the meditation. Please just notice the position of your mouth. And turn the corners upwards slightly. Smile. If you can put that smile on, sometimes that's lighting a match in the forest where everything else is tinder dry, just that little match will start the fire of joy, of bliss in your mind. So when the corners of the mouth are kind of anticipating happiness, then the happiness can come in. And when the happiness comes in, you'll find you can sit for long periods of time. Why? Because you're enjoying it. I got this story only a couple of days ago. It really inspired me. You know, for years and years, the monks at Bodhinyana Monastery in Perth have been teaching once a week in our local prison, Coronet Prison Farm. It's only about 8 kilometres up the road from Bodhinyana Monastery. And I started that off, but then one of the monks had been suggesting, why don't we do a half-day retreat at the prison? Now you're doing 8 or 9 days retreat, and that's a lot, but at a prison and have so many other things to do. To teach a half-day retreat for prisoners? So they just did one a few days ago, last Wednesday. And it was incredibly successful. Then I had about 20 or 30 prisoners there. And these are people who've done some terrible crimes. And they had 20 or 30 prisoners. And then they started the meditation. The governor of the prison was there just checking out, making sure there was no funny business. The first time they'd ever done this. And then meditate for an hour. And then the teacher there, good on him, said if you feel happy, then carry on meditating. And that's what they did. They meditated for 2 hours without moving. And I know what to meditate for 2 hours without moving means. You have to get some very, very nice meditation. And these were people who had done some terrible crimes. They were people in the local community in Perth who really looked down upon. And they'd done an amazing 2-hour meditation without moving any part of their body. To me it was like a sadhu. You can do that for people who weren't born as Buddhists. They were just ordinary people who've done some terrible crimes and put in jail. You can do that. Wow. That is impressive. That's also, I remember one of those prisoners years ago, they said they really loved the meditation. There's a peace and a happiness which no one could could take away from them. But in particular, I would always get up really early in the morning to meditate. And he was in a cell by himself, and he locked up all night. He'd get up early and sit on his pillow, cross his legs and meditate. He said there was one prison officer who would come by every morning to check on all the prisoners, would open the metal shutter of this barred window just to check out that the prisoners weren't escaping or anything. And there's one particular prison officer who would always go to his cell, spend extra time shining his flashlight at the prisoner's face. And if the prisoner never moved, then he would make a noise, banging on the metal door, scraping the flashlight against the bars, really loudly, until the prisoner would move. He'd disturb his meditation every morning. Have you ever been disturbed by sounds while you're meditating? This was a prisoner being disturbed by a prison officer. Why the prison officer was doing this, no one knows. But I told him what Ajahn taught me. Never allow the sound, so the sound never disturbs you. It's you who disturb the sound. In his particular case, it meant, please don't react to the sound. No matter how loud they bang on the cell door, no matter how powerful that flashlight is, beaming right into your face, sit there and don't allow the sound or the light to disturb you. And he did that. And soon he could sit so still and quietly that the prison officer gave up on him and just let him meditate. That's what life is like. Please, this is what prisoners, people in jail can do. Surely you can do even better than that. Or just like it may be that during this retreat, you need to go to the toilet or something. So, you open the door and go out to the toilet. It's much better to go to the toilet in the right place than doing your business on your chair, on your seat. So, people would complain about that. They would say, all these people coming in and out of the meditation hall, making all their noise. They're not being sensitive to us. They should wait. I said, no. If you really need to go, then go out. Why can't you, practicing mindfulness and compassion for others, why can't you go out of these doors in this meditation hall silently? Burglars can do that. They know how to open a door without making any noise and close it without making any noise. Why do you need to open it really noisily and bang? You'll never make a good burglar. Nor would you ever be able to join any secret police. What is the name of the secret police in Malaysia? Would you want to apply for a job? If you did, the way to get the job is to come on a retreat and then to come in and go out of the hall without anybody hearing you. Could you do that? Of course it's possible. So, that's one thing you can benefit on this retreat. If you need to go to the toilet, you open the door and close the door without anybody ever knowing. That's actually a kind of a training in mindfulness and kindness towards others. So this way, we're learning how to train our body and mind to be able to come and go silently, hardly ever making a noise. And if we hear somebody else's noise, we can always let that go too. That's called relaxing to the max. So your body feels at ease and your mind is peaceful. Do you have to think about people who make noise? Why do you have to worry about them? It's their karma. Why don't you just sit there and just forgive them and let it be? And anyway, so often people used to, on interview time, they would ask questions. Ajahn Brahm, can you please ask people to open and close the doors quietly? And I say, no, I won't. Where does all the noise come from? They open the door, creak, bang. That's all gone in maybe 1 or 2 seconds. Where is most of the noise coming from? Who was that? I know who that was. They're always the same. Any retreat I go on with them, they're always so noisy. They always bang things here and bang things there. They always make a big noise. They wear all this stuff which goes bang, clank, clink, clonk. They're so noisy. Actually, most of that noise comes from your mind, your reactions. So don't complain about them. Complain about your silly mind. The noise of the banging door stops after 1 or 2 seconds. The noise in your mind can go on all night. That's the noisy part. So when you know how to soften the noisy part, which is your reaction in your mind, then you know how to relax to the max. It's the max the most you can do. And after a while, the mind doesn't go out listening for any noise. The mind doesn't go out listening or looking for any stiffness in your body. When you meditate, does your body ache? Is there pains here or irritations there? Over in Australia, this time of the year, it's a great time of the year for a meditation retreat, because there's so many flies around. I remember there was one meditation talk I was giving, and I was saying, the flies in Australia, they don't bite you, they don't hurt. They're just exploring. One of the places I always like to explore is up your nose. Honestly. So if they crawl up your nose, they don't do any business up there. They just want to have a look, see what's up there. And they said, so if you feel any flies on your face, just let them be. Relax to the max. That's what I said. And after finishing my little piece of advice, then let's do some meditation now. I'm going to do a 45-minute meditation. And the camera was staring right at me. And exactly at that time when I said, let's meditate now, that's when a fly landed right here. I've got to be honest with you. Usually what I do, well, I couldn't do that now. I was embarrassed to do that because I just said not to. And I'm glad I didn't, because now I could gain insight into what the nature of the fly was. Many of those flies, especially those who come and land on you in a Buddhist monastery, they are all Buddhists themselves. And I proved that. Because a fly landed here. And then I just let it be. I was just going to watch it. It's kind of irritating, but it wasn't painful. And it started walking around to the side of my mouth. And as it was going round, I noticed an important insight. The side of your mouth is much more irritating than the underneath your nose or the bottom of your mouth. So once it got past this point, it was easy to endure. Then it went down to the other corner of my mouth, and that was very sensitive. I soon went past that, went to the base of the nose, and it went round another time, and another time. It went round 3 times, and then it flew off. That's why I realized it was a Buddhist. It did a circumambulation in the right direction for 3 circuits. Just like if ever you go to a Buddhist ceremony, around a stupa, you always go around 3 times. Around a Bodhi tree to worship it 3 times. Now that flower was worshipping my mouth 3 times. In the correct direction. So because of that, you don't need to be afraid. Even the snakes over in Bodhinyana Monastery. Do you have many snakes around Penang this time of year? No. You didn't invite any for my retreat? They are also Buddhist. They will never harm you. It's only if they feel afraid. And so many times, some of those snakes, even once, I remember going to see my preceptor at this one time, and because he was late coming to the appointment, that I was meditating, waiting for him. And afterwards he said, "Oh, your meditation's good." And I never realized that because he was even a city monk, he had to learn meditation when he was young. And he came from the island of Koh Samui in Thailand. It's now like a resort island. So in those early days, it was just a simple island off the coast of Thailand. And that when he was being trained as a monk, his teacher trained him to sit meditation. And this one time he got very peaceful while he was meditating. So peaceful that he went into a deep state. He was in a coconut grove. And as he was meditating in this coconut grove, after a few hours, he opened his eyes and he saw in his lap, coiled up, was a very dangerous snake. It was a kind of snake that his teachers and his parents had told him, "Be careful of that snake, don't play with it. It's very, very, very dangerous." And so what he did, as soon as he saw this snake coiled up in his lap, he recognized it immediately. But then he recognized there was no fear in him at all. He was not at all afraid. And that was really weird. I know this could kill me so quickly. I'm not at all afraid. So all he did was close his eyes again and carry on meditating. Not out of fear, out of confidence. And then, after about another 15 or 20 minutes, the snake just crawled gently, harmlessly away. That's how to deal with snakes. If you really feel even more confident, you can do what Ajahn did. How many of you have met Ajahn? Still alive? A few of you. What Ajahn did, he was sitting meditation in the jungle, and then this king cobra came crawling through the jungle. And they're quite noisy because they're such big bodies. And the king cobra came right up to him. He opened his eyes, the other monks opened their eyes. And this king cobra came so close to him, lifted up his head to look right at Ajahn, opened his hood. Are you afraid? There's no cobras in here. It's just a story. What would you do? When I first went from a country like England to Thailand, I always thought what I would do is get up and run. But then when I actually saw snakes like that, they can run so much faster than a human. They'll outrun you, they'll catch you so easily. It's a waste of time trying to run. So what Ajahn did, he knew he couldn't run to escape. This king cobra right in front of his nose. What he did, he raised his hand and patted the king cobra on the head. Thank you for coming to visit me. And what do you think the king cobra did? The king cobra enjoyed every second. It was such a rare opportunity to be patted on the head by such a holy monk. Would you like to have your head patted by an Ajahn? So do snakes as well. No way in the world will they harm you. And then, that snake, having his head patted, he decided to try one of the other monks. So, closed his hood, put his head down, went to one of the other monks, raised his head in front of the other monks. And the other monk said, "No way. If you want to have more patting, go to Ajahn." But then, later on, Ajahn came to Bodhinyana Monastery, where I lived early on, and spent a few months there. And this was the time we were building our main hall at Bodhinyana Monastery. We'd applied for our building permission, and so we got a visit from the mayor of Serpentine Jarradale Shire. He was the boss of the whole council. He came to check us out. And that mayor, Mr. Clem Kentish, his name was even more fat than I am. He was wearing a suit, and I did notice those buttons were really being stretched. They could pop at any time. And, it didn't always look like this. There were some old photos of me when I was a young monk in Thailand. I was really thin. I was so thin, my 6th range retreat, when I was exploring other teachers in Thailand. They call this going on too long. I was exploring other teachers. I went to see Ajahn Mahabua. Ajahn Mahabua was one of the strictest of the forest monks. And he had an important rule. Only one meal a day. And that one meal a day, always out of your bowl. Everyone was sitting in a line. And no one could start until Ajahn Mahabua started. And once Ajahn Mahabua finished, everyone else had to finish. I was warned that once you start eating, eat quickly. Otherwise, you're not going to eat enough. So that happened. I was prepared. So as soon as Ajahn Mahabua started eating, see all the other monks shuffling as fast as they could. Me too. And then he stopped eating. So everyone put their spoons down. They had to stop. And they all bowed to get up to wash their bowl. And then he looked at me. So you carry on eating. That's true. I was so thin, the thinnest monk of anyone he'd ever seen. Carry on eating. I was so obedient. I followed his instructions without any comment. That's what I'm saying. Anyway, Clem Kentish, the mayor, he came to see us. And I noticed him at a distance. But so did Ajahn Ganha, who can't speak any English. And Ajahn Ganha went right up to him, smiled, and started rubbing the mare's belly. And I thought, oh no! No more buildings at Bodhinyana Monastery, that's it. Because you don't go around, patting people or rubbing their bellies, in Western culture. Not even obviously in Malaysian culture either. Imagine you went up to someone and started rubbing their belly. Ooh. But anyway, just the way that Ajahn Ganha did that, he was so kind. And that mayor, he loved every minute of it. Honestly, we got all of our approvals to build whatever we want. And he became a good friend of the monastery. So if any one of you wants to do any more extensions to the Penang Buddhist Association, I don't know who the Chief Minister of Penang is now. Who is it? Is he fat? No. You can always invite Ajahn Ganha here to give it a try. Have you ever noticed just how powerful that kindness is? How it can relax people to the max. Yeah, why not? These are good people. If that doesn't work, I know that there was a Chinese group who wanted to build a monastery in the north of Perth. They were good people. Known them for a while. And they had trouble with their council. So they invited me, Ajahn Brahm, you've been a monk longer than most of us. Can you please come and see if you can talk the local councillors into giving us approval for our monastery? Yeah, sure. So when I went to their meeting, I was introduced. I said, now my background is as a scientist in theoretical physics from Cambridge University in England. And I said, I've come across some very interesting scientific research. And I said, I read it out. According to experiments done in Taiwan, a duck lays an egg on average every 3 days. If they listen to Buddhist chanting, they lay an egg every 2 days. Their productivity goes up. And I said, in your council area, so many people have chicken farms to make eggs. So I said, if you have this Buddhist monastery here, you will find the productivity will go about 50%. And I said it just as I say it to you, with a big smile. And they started laughing. I said, but this is true. And I showed them the science research. And so they got the approval for a monastery through to increase productivity in the area. How's the productivity in Penang right now? Can Penang really accept higher productivity? Yes. Well, please ask for some more extensions on the Penang Buddhist Association. You've got the scientific proof it works. So that kind of kindness, that gentleness, that actually makes people listen. They're not afraid of you. And they realize when people's minds are more peaceful, they can produce so much more. I'll give talks about that later on. But it is true. This is how meditation works. Relax to the max. You still have to work, but it's to the max so you can relax enough so you can work more efficiently. Because I've got this here, might as well use it. You've probably heard me give this simile many times before. How heavy is this cup? How heavy is this cup? Somebody told me that their son is studying at Imperial College in London. And when I went to Imperial College to teach some Buddhism and meditation, I did this simile. I held up a cup of water and said, how heavy is the cup of water? If you know Imperial College, it's a very smart kids go there, mostly in science. And somebody said, about 180 grams. You know what I meant? How heavy is this? The longer you hold it, the heavier it feels. If I keep holding this for 1 minute, my arm will start to ache. After 5 minutes, my arm will be in pain. After 10 minutes, oh my goodness, you probably have to take me to the hospital. And I'll be a very stupid monk. What should I do when this gets too heavy to hold comfortably? Put it down. Simple as that. I'm stuck. Attachment. Then after resting for 5 or 10 minutes, even if just 2 minutes, I can pick this up, and it feels lighter. It feels lighter. So that's the way we overcome stress in life. If you're busy at work and you have half an hour for lunch, instead of having lunch, you come into the hall and do some meditation. After the meditation, you feel so relaxed. Your brain is so much more efficient than it was before, which means you get more work done of higher quality in less time. One of the things which I keep over is over in my hut over in Bodhinyana Monastery. And one of the first books which I wrote was called Opening the Door of Your Heart. You've seen that one before, have you? That was, I think, about 30 years ago I wrote that. And it's still a bestseller in its German edition, the Spiegel. And it's so well known, but what people don't realize, when I first wrote that, I didn't type it out on a computer. I never had a computer. I wrote it just with a pen on paper. And I still have the original manuscript. And every now and again, when I want to inspire myself, I get out that manuscript, have a look at it. There's hardly any mistakes in it. No, don't call them typos because it's written. Hardly anything crossed out. It's all written almost perfectly. And the reason was because I was kind of forced to complete this. What happened actually, one of the disciples, she said, look, it's almost criminal not to share this further. It should be put in the book. Yeah, but I don't have enough time. I'm not really motivated enough. And she said, well, look, let me do it and I'll show it to you to make sure it's okay. So she wrote out some of those stories. When I read the first few stories she'd written out, she made such a mess of them. It was just hopeless. It was terrible. So now I better do it myself. She outwitted me. If she asked me to do it, kept on badgering me to do it, it would not have worked. When she does it, it makes a mess of it. And I know I have to do it. But I didn't have that much time. So what I did, I was doing a personal retreat. And I said, okay, I will spend 1 hour every day, not 1 hour and 1 minute, not 59 minutes, exactly 1 hour. And I'll write out these stories. And that's it. And so, for 13 days, in the first retreat I did, over half the book was written out. Easy. And each of those stories was almost perfect as I wrote it out first time. And that kind of surprised me, but it was true. If you do lots of meditation, mind becomes very peaceful. It becomes so clear. Just the story kind of flows. That's exactly the way which I wrote it. One draft and that was it. And also just the way it was published. Once I did the second half or the third or something, then I gave it to a disciple to type up. They typed it up on a computer on one of these little discs. And they finished it just in time. I was going to Melbourne to do some teaching. And so they had this little disc. And they said, I've just finished it. So I've just put it in my bag, which they did, one of these bags. And once they put it in that bag, then I went over to Melbourne. I hadn't even looked at it myself. And then after the first talk, arrived at the airport. Please excuse me for not coming straight to Penang, Buddhist Association from the airport. But in those days, I would have just come here straight away. It doesn't matter how tired I was. Usually I give much better talks when I'm tired. That's why the monks know that now. They make me tired on purpose, so they get a better talk. So anyhow, I gave a talk at Melbourne University, and after the talk was finished, this lady came up to me and said, "It was a wonderful talk." She said, "I work in the publishing industry." This is absolutely true. I work in the publishing industry. If you have any books you ever want to be considered, please let me see them. Well, I reached in my bag. And I still remember her name. This is a really weird name. Magnolia Flora. Her name was. And so her company published it. And it did become an incredible bestseller. But also, I didn't see her for a few years. She made a point of searching me out and said, "Thank you, I wasn't a Buddhist when I got that book, but I haven't been around because I got cancer." And said, "Your book helped me heal that cancer, full remission now." And so thank you. So it's beautiful when that's a real remuneration you get, not from any money or royalties. You find it actually works. And people get healthier. So anyway, that's how you can inspire yourself and give importance to meditation. Put things down, for goodness sake. Stop carrying them. On this retreat, what would you like to put down? To give up? To renounce? To let go so you don't have to be bothered with at all, for the next 8 or 9 days. Why not? And then, once it's put down, you find that whatever you need to do in life, you can do without wasting so much time. With zero stress. How many monasteries do I look after? Quite a few. Do I look stressed out? Do I? This is how to run businesses, run monasteries, run centers. Do a lot of meditation, and you can do it so clearly, so easily, so beautifully. Okay, that's 10 o'clock.